If you want to turn them off, hit the little button and it'll turn red, but it's on for the intent of everybody hearing everybody, and I think taking it as well. So, Dean's on. Oh, he turned it on, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna call the meeting to order. As of now, we need to excuse Commissioner Rivenbark and Mr. Briggs.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're going to turn it over to Ken. He's going to present the 2 budget notes.
Good morning, and my intention is to be brief.
Thank you.
We appreciate the opportunity to respond to comments and questions that arose from our last board meeting. From that, staff thought they heard 2 issues, which we'll test that premise right now. The first was encompassed by budget note number 1. Discussion at the table on May 8th raised concerns, or at least we thought we heard it raise concerns around staffing commitments, resources, and stress imposed on staff, particular or specific to the engineering services department. And we want to acknowledge that in the budget that we presented, we recognize that the workload for the engineering services department is higher over the next 2.5 years than we would be comfortable with normally with the staffing that is there. Within your budget, we propose to address that problem through contract services, shifting the payment component over to the capital improvement plan. But we wanted to offer you an option to consider insourcing that workload. And that option before you offers up the creation of 2 new full-time equivalent positions, one to be advertised and hired immediately, one halfway through the year if needed. The cost associated with that was $228,900 for the first year, with additional costs in succeeding years. There's 2 ways to pay for that. The first would be to adjust the proposed rate increase from the currently proposed 4.6 to a 4.83. The other alternative is to reduce the overall funding to capital reserve, in particular the Southside project. So that's budget note number 1. And I would note that staff is still comfortable with the initial proposal of addressing this need through contract services, but we are also comfortable with upstaffing and insourcing if that is something that the board would like to take up. For budget note number 2, staff heard at the table that there were some concerns around staffing commitment, resources, and stress imposed on staff through the implementation of our inclusion, equity, and belonging training and associated activities. We've offered up a number of attachments that we hope will allow the board to evaluate that. And we, again, offer 3 alternatives based on what we thought we heard at the table. The first option would be to move forward with the project as designed and funded with no change to the budget. Option 2 would be to defund the activity in the FY25 budget. And because you're undertaking budgetary activities, and this is something of a policy discussion, you would have to, after adopting an amended budget, then take up the policy item and amend the strategic plan. And then option 3 is something that staff saw as something of a compromise, which would defund the outside support activities in next year's budget, but continue with the initiative as it's designed. So again, we offer up this budget note for your consideration, and stand ready for any questions or to turn it back over to the chair for discussion.
I've got.
Go ahead, Mr. You're on.
Is it on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're on.
Okay. Several questions relative to staffing. As I see the duties of staff, there should be three things. One is project management for capital improvement projects, in-house design, and plan review. So the staff that we have, roughly what percentages of the staff time is used for those 3 three things.
Carl, would you like to take a stab at that?
Oh, I was looking at you.
I can. So the plan review group for development activities is obviously totally separate from the capital improvement plan because their workload is generated by the development community.
Right.
And that includes our inspectors, our plan reviewers, and the leadership of that group. And I think their time is 100%, if you will, dedicated to just that activity: plan review, building permit review, and inspection. For our in-house planning and design group, and then the project management activities. Again, our project managers don't do the project management in the traditional sense that you would see with a consultant. Our project managers manage the consultants, which means that a project manager can take on many more projects than you would see on the private side, where you would actually have to do the technical aspects of the work. So they are fully, they're fully engaged with all the projects. So they don't have, other than, I think they would typically be like 80% committed time-wise to that work, and then the remainder would be generally for non-project related things, whether it's training, whether it's non-project related activities. But again, we rely mostly on the consultants to do the heavy lift, and our project managers do the administrative part. And that's why we looked at it two ways, Mr. Smith. We looked at it one way was, in terms of the graph that was in the packet on what their resource capacity is. But then second to that, I amended it and looked at actually the count of how many projects a project manager will have to manage over the next 2.5 years, and was that within what they have traditionally done. And when looking at it that way, it supported that, yes, we do need some additional resources, whether that's in-house or outsourced.
Okay. If I could
Go ahead.
continue on that line. So what we're looking at here is really what we need to, staff-wise or consultant-wise, to oversee capital improvements, it looks like, at least for the next 2 years.
Yes, sir.
And if you got a consultant on board, then how would you propose using that consultant in this capacity? Specific projects? And one other thing I read from this. The if and when Wrightsville Beach agreement comes to fruition, that doesn't include any of that oversight in this proposal.
Correct.
Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, we had always envisioned that the Wrightsville Beach project's execution, because of the outside funding that was associated with it and the time frame to execute, that would probably be more conducive to a program manager. So that would be a consultant to manage that whole program and divide the work up with other consultants in order to, that would do the actual detailed technical work. That would be the model for the Wrightsville Beach activities. For our other projects, we had envisioned that it would be where we would just ask the consultants to, an expanded scope of work to take on some of the administrative things that our project managers do, and and take on maybe some of the very few in-house projects that we design ourselves.
Well, if I were sitting on your staff, I'd be very excited about the projects that are coming up and the ability to be managing the consultants on some of these projects. But having the consultant there to where you don't necessarily give them, in advertising the thing, saying you're going to give them a specific project, but being able to have the flexibility to give them things from time to time on a project-by-project basis. I think that's a very good thing to have, because we do have surprises every now and then, and we need to be able to take care of that. On the other hand, I'd love to see you have the in-house staff to take care of this stuff and not have to have the consultant.
Yeah.
So,
There's a little bit of a fine line, because obviously we do not want to demotivate our own staff by
Absolutely.
outsourcing the work.
Absolutely.
And that's the fine balance that we have to walk. And, and I think it requires constant monitoring, similar to what we did with the information in the packet, to make sure projects are executed on time, but also that our own staff has, their normal workload and don't feel that their work is being outsourced.
with that said, what I'm getting to is I favor a combination of option 1 and option 2.
That's fair.
Yeah.
If I might, these business case judgments, they can easily go either way. The strength of the outsourcing model is that you don't have the long-term commitments that you would have in terms of benefits and retirement that you would have baked into full-time staff. The weakness of that model is if you're still spreading a lot of work among your existing staff and you lose 1 or 2 staff members to recruitment or retirement, then all of a sudden you may not have that internal bandwidth to manage that extraordinary load, even with consultant resources. So it's a judgment call. And at the end of the day, I took this on myself and focused on what I thought was the board's overriding desire to ensure that we kind of was as lean and as efficient as possible, and that we're getting as close to that 4.6 as we had previously laid out. So as you can see, the option that we give you here, it does have some trade-offs. It would require something more than 4.6 in terms of rate increase to add staff. Or we would put less aside for Southside, which means we would have to acquire more funding later. It's a classic business decision. And I lay it in front of you to say that I don't think there's a wrong or right answer, because you're always making these types of decisions. We'd be perfectly comfortable with either option or a hybrid, as long as you know that there's trade-offs for it.
Well,
Go ahead, Wes.
so, I've kind of brought this up at the budget meeting, and the intent is, I think most people know this, but we're at a really, since I've been on the board, a very critical time as far as staffing goes. Due to retirements, due to people leaving already, due to market conditions. We're at the point where, again, like you just said, if a couple of these key people aren't here, we really can't do the business that we need to do, or at least the way that we've been doing it. And so my big thing, and we've talked about this over the last few weeks, is I think we need to do everything we can to motivate the really, really good, talented staff we have here to stay. Number one, whether that's dollars, whatever that is. I feel like that is an investment in the people we have here that we're confident in do a great job every day. And then 2, you know, there's only been a couple of times I've brought up the staffing thing and, or adding staff, but I've always leaned on staff's opinion. You know, Carl knows what his staffing needs are and has a real good view for the organization now and in the future. My concern was the stress on the existing, like, yeah, they can get through it, but at what cost, right? And if that's comfortable, that's fine. I just think we need to bring this, to me, whether we take action now or not, I'm a little up in the air on, but I just think it's something we need to be aware of and mindful of and realize that we really don't have a bullpen. I mean, we got very few people in key positions. So, you know, again, it's hard for me to say that we should authorize another full-time position if that's not the recommendation of staff, especially in a tight budget. Like, that's hard, but I think we need to, like, I just want to raise my hand that, like, we've got to, you know, this could change very quickly and we may have to react to it. And we need to, in my opinion, we need to invest in the people we have heavily.
And I think that's the expectation of the staff comes back to us and says, we need somebody.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Commissioner.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Wes, I think you're just being too polite. I know. I see and I hear not as much as you do. I know you're literally, you know, in the field, standing there with your boots, which, by the way, I admire very much. I think they look great. To me, it's a four-part question, or the solution is, you know, one is the sheer volume of the work that we have coming forward. And to that, I point to the northern part of the county, the investments that this organization and our county is making there, along with state, you know, input as well. We can't ignore that. I mean, the master planning, which is currently going on, I know we're all aware of, is huge, and that's coming at us like a huge freight train. We don't have the people on the ground now that can handle the volume of that work that's going there, and we know that just by the level of frustration, which is my second point, that we already see within the development community about things, you know, not moving quickly. I know from my point of view and working with our permitting staff here at the county, we try to do everything we possibly can, working with the Inspections Department Advisory Committee. But the one thing that comes up every time in those meetings is it gets hung up at CFPUA. That has, you know, been the frustration for years. It has gotten better, but it continues. I see that only getting more problematic as we go forward. The third thing is the loss of institutional memory that we're going to have with Carl moving out. Thank goodness we've got other senior staff that can kind of move up, but we have lost, as you just said, our bench is getting thin. And that, along with that loss of institutional memory, goes what I keep calling the go-to guy. When developers and even builders and homeowners get too frustrated, there's always that relief valve, and it's been Carl who can step in and go, oh, I can deal with this, I'll get back to you in an hour. And it happens. I know that because I've put the pressure on him, and that's how it happens. He's not going to be there. We'll have other people who will fit that in, but to me, that's a red flag when, you know, talking about the loss of institutional memory and the ability for our organization to meet the demands that are coming forward. Fourth point is, I think it's really important in my mind, you know, one director here, of staying with the 4.6 increase, trying to find some stability and sending that message out to our community. I also have high hopes that we will see some kind of a settlement in the future, so that yes, we defer a little bit of money going towards the Southside wastewater treatment plant, but I think we're going to see from a number of different places, a settlement being one of them, but also state and federal money coming in to help take some of the pressure off, so that we stay on stay the course with what we've laid out already, and then we get to that point where we know, or the hockey stick graph that we have there. I think that money will be there, but I would support bringing both of the people on in the way that's been laid out, one immediately and one further on in the year. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Go ahead.
If we were to bring both on, as Rob and I think Wes alluded to, what does that do to the to the rate model? I may have missed that in the presentation.
So the budget note offers two options. One is we're going to have to acquire revenue or spend less somewhere. And scenario number one would see a rate increase of 4.83% instead of 4.6. Scenario number two, basically this is option 2B, is to transfer less in capital reserves to the Southside wastewater treatment plant, which means you have less there when it's time to issue construction contracts. You have to make that up through something in the future.
I believe budget note 1 is the more important discussion that we need to have here, but I do have some thoughts on budget note 2.
Before we get to 2,
I think we should wrap that up.
let's kind of wrap up 1
Agreed.
and either have an amendment or not to the budget for 1.
Understood, thank you.
Yeah, kind of trying to keep them separate, I think, for ease. Go ahead, Commissioner.
The way I see this is pay me now, pay me later. And, you know, I look at our county's budget right now, we're in the same predicament where we've cut our rate several years in a row, taking roughly $12 million out of our budget. And now we're having to either cut programs or raise rates. And if you know you're going to have costs in the future, I think you maintain your course now or you increase your revenue coming in so that you can do those things down the road, because there's no guarantee you're going to have the resources down the road to make up the difference that you may not be putting aside. I don't know any smart business person that would say, give me less money to run my operation when you know costs are going up. And what we've seen in all construction projects is the bids have come in higher on almost everything. And with that being said, you know, I don't have a problem increasing the rate and bringing on the 2 additional people as well. Yes, I'm hopeful that we'll get a settlement down the road, but that's not guaranteed. But what is guaranteed is what your rate is today. You know you're going to get those dollars. You know, hope is really not a good strategy to run any business. But I would just hate to see us under-resource the organization, thinking that things will change down the road when what I have seen, you know, the business I'm in real estate, the cost of housing continues to go up. And the cost of doing business everywhere continues to go up. So if that goes up, your revenue needs to at least maintain itself, if not increase as well. Those are my thoughts, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Hack.
Just as an aside, I know the 2 positions we're talking about, I mean, we've got in-house engineering and then guys that are looking at the consultants, and this is mainly to serve the CIP and all of our investment. But I don't want to mess with the budget right now, but, you know, given the fact that all of this infrastructure is going to increase development, and development is our revenue stream, you need to not, you know, that the inspections and plan review is standalone. We're not talking about adding positions there. However, in the future, they're going to be overrun with projects. If you can't get those out the door, then we're not getting our development fees and revenue. So for another discussion, do not lose fact that we're going to be, this wave is going to crash right down on development services in the future.
I expect in future budgets we'll need to talk about the development review, plan review, inspection side of things.
And that's may not want to spend any money on development services, but
Super important.
Just one note, when you're looking at the options versus a consultant versus hiring those positions, the thing that hiring positions builds bench strength within the organization, where having consultant services doesn't. And I think we got to look, if we have turnover, we need that bench strength. And that's where you get bench strength, is by bringing people on board and letting them grow with the organization.
I think that's where we are.
I still feel very strongly that you need to look at both options 1 and option 2. Option 1, you don't have to spend the money, but you got the resource there when you need it, and it doesn't, if something happens, you don't put this extra stress on the existing staff.
Well, option one will be in the budget no matter, I mean, the option one is the budget, so we don't really have to do anything with option one. That's,
Well, the way I was
that's kind of
reading,
that's what's in the budget. So if we
So-
did nothing, we would have option one.
so I didn't read it that way. If you have an option one or an option two,
You have essentially two options, but option two has a two ways to pay for it. And what I can say is, if we chose option two, the way we've laid it out, we would hire one of those positions immediately, and no sooner than halfway through the budget, hire the second one. Well, if we discovered that we could manage that workload without the second position, obviously I would come back to you and say, I don't think we need to hire it. If we felt like we could manage it through expansion of contract services and we were managing that bench depth piece, I would come back and give you some feedback. That would probably be at both executive committee finance and long-range planning. But what you're doing is you're giving us a basket of options. The furthest extent of that would be 2 full-time positions by the end of next year. The middle ground would be 1 full-time position, and then what we proposed in our budget is to just outsource everything. Those are your options. And then how do you pay for it, which is the next step.
Okay, go ahead, Councilman Waddell, go ahead.
The Southside wastewater treatment plant reserves, the option that keeps the rate increase the same rather than taking it to 4.85, moves some transfers from Southside wastewater treatment plant. What is the total reserve? I mean, what is the total amount of reserves that we have? We were talking about 211,000 reserves. We'd probably make that up somewhere. I mean, is this a small percentage of the reserves?
Yeah, well, I think what you'd be looking at is, can you remind me of the total for those 2 positions is 200 and?
Well,
228 in
It's
fiscal
228 and some change, but you remember the complexities of our budgeting would lead to about 211 less next year.
Okay, and so in terms of the model, looking at a 5 or 6 year period, you're looking at those positions. In the model, we're going to bake in a compounded, call it 5 or 6% increase in those numbers. Okay, so if you accumulate that all together, you're looking at probably between $1.5 million, $2 million, something like that. So, looking at carving out or having to borrow for Southside about $2 more million. So under the scenario that we talked about, where we're kind of, cruising along on this 4.6, and then doing this hockey stick thing where we make up for it in maybe years 5 and 6, or maybe just year 6, that's just going to make that hockey stick a little more sharp, just a little more steep. Maybe, right. I mean, and this is all caveated with, we're making projections on 5 or 6 years out. That's right.
We don't have a final cost on the project, and we don't know where we'll land in other revenues. But, you make a lot of decisions based off of limited information. I think the takeaway is you can pay for it now or pay for it later. And maybe there are things later that will make it softer, and maybe they won't be here.
There's a point here, I think Wes or maybe Dean's brought up, and I apologize if I'm getting this wrong. It keeps kind of getting pushed to the back, which is the increased efficiency we have as an organization to bring developers on and development on increases our revenues. Where the scenarios, what John, you were saying is you're inferring that everything stays flat and that we're just borrowing that money from the Southside Fund. If we have a more efficient organization that's bringing more development on, we are increasing our revenues over that same 5-year period. So in your model, do we have a model that would show increased revenues that would make up for it? In other words, the 2 new spots, as you say, over a 5-year period, costing us over $1 million, will they bring in more than $1 million in revenues because of the developments that wouldn't have been there without them?
So our model is not that sophisticated, trying to predict what growth or the volume of growth in a given year and how many years out that might happen and over what time period. So the model does not have that in there.
Okay.
I think what you're saying is true, and I think another point I'd like to bring up is, I think that we've talked about this, with the board, just in terms of the setting of the fees that are charged for plan reviews, inspections, those types of things, trying to maybe more closely align those to the cost of providing those services. Those rates and fees have been, I don't think, in my time here, so in my 8 years here, we've never made a change to those fees despite, cost inflation, salary increases, those types of things. So just kind of wanted to put that caveat out there.
Mr. Smith, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm still confused with the term option 1, option 2. Option 1, move forward with the budget as proposed.
Yes.
Option 2 is authorize 2 additional positions. So it doesn't, if you're reading it, it doesn't say that option 1 stays there and option 2 is adding to option.
My apologies
is that-
if it wasn't clear.
that's the intent, though?
That's the intent.
Thank
So
you.
my apologies if it wasn't clear.
Okay.
The intent of the budget note was to say, option 1 is to continue with what's proposed in the budget, which is outsourcing. Option 2 is to insource some of that activity through 2 positions. One hired immediately, one hired no sooner than halfway through the year. And then under option 2, you have 2 sub-options on how to pay for it.
If I could address Mr. Smith's comments.
Just hang on.
Sure,
Commissioner
of course,
Merfield,
yep.
sorry.
We're talking about future growth here, and I'm going back to the county again. For years and years, we anticipated growth in sales tax. Well, sales tax has become flat. In some cases, it's actually underperformed what we thought. Going at the Parade of Homes banquet last month, what I noticed in the diagram that they showed there, most of your construction and new homes being built in Brunswick County and somewhat in Pender County. And I'm not sure how much growth we're going to have left in Brunswick County with a limited amount of land, but growth is taking place outside of our community. So we're projecting we're going to have an enormous amount of growth 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I just don't think that's going to be the case for this county. And I think we need to be prepared for that. We're the second smallest county in the state land-wise, and we have dwindling acreage left. But again, how many homes are you building in New Hanover County, Deans?
I'm in the 30.
And how many are you building in Brunswick County?
In Brunswick County, we don't build any yet.
Exactly. And what I heard in that banquet is everyone was really building in Brunswick County. That's where a lot of growth is taking place.
I'll disagree. I think the growth, the homes that are being built in Brunswick County are not homes being built in Hanover County. We're growing like crazy because there's a different market. I think you're seeing a decrease in revenue in New Hanover County because the market that they're building is more susceptible to interest rate risk. So I think when they open up, I think people are dying, they're just itching to open up that northeast corridor. Even Carl and Gary said, Geo Hortons put in a lift station on Sidbury Road. I think they're already competing for their own capacity, for the additional capacity for the next, for the next project. So, I'm not a good litmus test for New Hanover County. We finished our last project on College Road, and Robin made me move to Brunswick to do one type of building, not 2. So, but.
Commissioner Zappa, go ahead, sorry.
If I could just follow up on it, I certainly hope that we see the kind of growth that we're anticipating. We're investing $45, $50 million up in there for water and sewer along Holly Shelter, Sidbury, and Plantation Road. I think there's a pause in the building right now in the north part of the county while we wait for that infrastructure to get in. That's the preparation for it, and the plans that I've seen we're talking thousands, if not tens of thousands of homes and businesses going in that are not there today. So that growth is coming. It may not be here today, but it will be in the very near future.
But what we're talking about is, for today in the budget, is just the positions to get this infrastructure in the ground, not development services.
That's correct.
So
Yep.
think about what we're doing right now.
Oh, I do, although this organization is based on playing the long game. And has, all the decisions we make, I think, have got to be forward-looking. And just a quick comment to Mr. Smith about option number 1. The way I interpret that is that we have currently in the budget the money for hiring consultants, but only for this year. So that if we were to continue down that path, we would have to find more money for more consultants as we go down that way. I think, in my mind, one director, I prefer the model that Mr. Director Norris brought up, is that we start building our bench now so that we have the capacity and the people in place to handle this growth as we go forward. It makes a lot more sense to me to bring these people on now in-house, and so that we have them and not rely on the consultants.
If I
Okay.
might.
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
sorry. No.
I've observed there's kind of two debates going on here. One is insourcing versus outsourcing, and the other is how to pay for it. May I suggest that you act like you're addressing two issues, to make a decision on whether to insource or outsource, and then make a decision on how to pay for it, if you choose to insource.
So what I'd like to do is take a motion to keep it as is, or include option 2 to add sources. We'll vote on that, and then we'll have a separate vote on how do we, if, depending on that, how we fund option 1.
That would be
Uh,
2A or 2B in the second.
Yes, yes, second vote is, so first vote is 1 or 2, second vote is 2A or 2B.
Not 1 or 2.
I'm sorry, what? We're going to vote on either keeping the budget as is, or 2 adds, is going to change the budget. And then we're going to vote on, if we change the budget, how are we going to fund it?
I move for option 2.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to increase the headcount in a second. All those in favor of say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we have a motion, okay, we will add positions. So now we need a motion to either fund it through a rate increase or fund it through changing the south side wastewater treatment plant reserve. So I'll take a motion,
I move item 2B, so scenario number 2 to fund.
reducing the south side wastewater treatment plant
Yes.
reserves to fund the headcounts. Okay, so we have a motion on the
Second.
table, motion and a second to fund the increased headcount by reducing the south side wastewater treatment plant reserves. All those in favor, any discussion, any more discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so now we'll have a motion to amend the budget per 2B. Okay, that's one budget amendment. Okay, so now we're on to budget note 2.
Jennifer,
Go-
Madam Chair,
go ahead,
do we
go ahead.
need to amend the budget in reference to this first, before we move on to the second?
No, we can move on to budget note 2 now. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, no, Nick's telling me wrong. So now we need a motion to amend the budget as per the above.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right. Now we can move on to budget note 2. Any questions, comments, discussion? Go ahead, Commissioner.
Kick it off.
Councilman, sorry. I'm trying to be good and saying last names.
I know we had a lot of discussion about this, both in closed session and in open session in our last meeting. I'm still inclined to make a motion for option number 2 that was presented for budget note 2, presented by Ken, with regards to DEI and IEB, whichever we're going to call it. But Ken, you mentioned that if we were, if I was to make that motion and it was to pass, that we would then, it would necessitate a strategic plan discussion. Would that have to happen today as well?
Well, left the door open for that. But essentially, option two the way that is laid out is, at the very least, you would need, after adopting the budget, to take up the policy item to instruct me to end expenditures on the initiative.
But we don't immediately have to act on the strategic plan today.
No,
It could be at the next
That's a
meeting.
later,
that
Board meeting.
is correct, but the descriptive in option two is essentially to end all of those associated activities. And we have some underway now under the FY '24 budget under contract. So you can't make that particular policy decision inside of the budget debate. We've left you a space after adoption of an amended budget to have that discussion.
Well, I'm in favor of that, but I would assume there's going to be some discussion, so I'm not going to make any, take any action at this time.
so do we have any discussion on budget note two?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner Thomas.
Just kind of, dive right in. I think this organization has made great strides, led by our executive director, Ken, in dealing with some very structural issues that have been around in this organization for a number of years. And we've taken direct steps on in opening up the conversation throughout the entire organization from top to bottom. We've taken the step to bring in Ms. Clayboss, who is working within each department and working with individuals within our organization to bring forward those concerns. I don't see any reason to go backwards there. I think I am open to the discussion that if we want to look to someone to finish out the contract we have with Intellect, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, and I know it sometimes makes people feel a little uncomfortable outside of their comfort zone, and even to the point of feeling somewhat silly. Is there some of the issues they talk about seem so basic and obvious. Part of the problem is that they're touching on areas that are not obvious until you actually go into it and you allow your own comfort zone to take the information in. It's not obvious to everyone, I guess it is. But if we want to expand that and to look to internally or even sharing some with the county, other resources here, I think that's only expanding the ideas and taking advantage of what's here in our own community to be able to backfill where Intellect, once we finish out the current contract with them. But I think these are issues that we can't just close the door and pretend like they don't exist. And there may be another way to go at it. I'm certainly open to that kind of conversation. But I think it's really important, the work that we've done, and I think the progress we've had is already showing. Those are my comments at the moment.
Go ahead, Commissioner Murphy.
I think that if we were to defund IEB, it would send the wrong message to the employees of Cape Fear Public Utility Authority. There have been many inclusive conversations, and folks feel like they're being heard for the first time in a long time. And taking away, we're here to represent the organization, but also to make sure that employees are in a good place. If your staff isn't good, your organization will never be good. And being very transparent, I guess a couple of years ago, I actually sat down with about 7 employees from here. I invited them to my home. That way they could have an honest conversation and share with me what was going on. And what I walked away with in that conversation was that CFPUA was like a mini plantation with bosses, much like you would see on a plantation. ruling individuals as if they were the master. And I felt sick to my stomach hearing the conversations that I heard from employees that work in this organization, the ones that are really doing the work, fixing things that are in the ground. Lack of opportunities to move up, lack of being promoted, others being promoted, and then individuals training them to do the job that they were already qualified to do. I was asking myself, how in 2022, 23, could you have an organization that's a part of a government that has that type of mentality? But it was real. We use words like microaggressions, things that people say that, for me, it was sickening. And I recognized the need for us to do something, to the point where this organization probably could have faced some type of a federal lawsuit based on conversations for me that were had. But there were interventions that took place that thwarted those things. And I think that with bringing a whole host of folks together, and IEB is not just about race. It's about a whole lot of things. It's about a whole host of things. When you use the word affordable housing, people think one thing, public housing, but affordable housing's definition is housing that doesn't exceed 30% of your income. But when you say IEB or diversity, equity, and inclusion, people just think one thing, but it's a whole host of other things. And I think we'd be sending the wrong message to the rank and file from the top to the bottom by defunding this new department. I'll be in favor of option 3. I think the county has got a robust system in place. I think Linda Thompson could come in and add her expertise to the table. I mean, she's hosted, this year will be the 3rd diversity summit at Cape Fear Community College. I think last year there were over 120 participants that came from different organizations. But when we look at our community, every major employer, including the city of Wilmington and New Hanover County, Novant, General Electric, Encino, Live Oak Bank, all have this initiative baked into their organization, including your major banks. Every major employer has this as a part of their initiative. And for us to go backwards, I think will send the wrong message to the general public and our ratepayers. Those are my comments for now.
Thank you.
Just address some of those items. I mean, across the state, first of all, I made my feelings clear on this being part of the strategic plan when I first was put on this board about a year ago. Didn't know Commissioner Barfield very well at the time, but immediately he told me I was saying that because I have implicit bias and
We all have it.
if I may, I have the floor, Commissioner.
We all have
Commissioner. That it was because I had implicit bias was why I took any issue with including that in the strategic plan. But across the state and the country, organizations are reevaluating their needs for these kind of initiatives. Just a couple weeks ago, Chapel Hill school system reallocated their DEI budget to public safety as they dealt with financial issues. I believe today, the University of North Carolina school system in its entirety is discussing whether or not to maintain DEI as an initiative. I believe they will remove it. But more importantly than that is how I think this adversely affects our organization. I've heard from multiple staff members since a couple weeks ago who asked to remain confidential because they shared the feelings that I shared when I sat through 20 minutes or so of the DEI presentation about a month ago, where I was standing on a postcard of my feelings for 20 minutes with my colleagues. But they don't have the option to speak up, and they just want to do the work that they're hired to do. I truly feel it's going to adversely affect our organization. I think it already has. And I continue to believe that option number 2, I mean, I believe a couple of years ago, I asked why we didn't just utilize the county's robust DEI services rather than adding our own. Now it seems that that's on the table. But I'm still inclined to take option number 2 at this time.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Dr. Cannon.
thank you so much. I just want to make a couple of quick observations. You know, the elephant in the room is the politicization of this issue, which is unfortunate. I too believe that it would send the wrong message both internally and externally if we try to turn back the hands of progress and time and these decisions that we already made. I think it's important to put on the record that part of the discussion around DEI around the country comes from the SCOTUS decision, 6-3. We have a 6-3 court, and they have ruled in education settings that you cannot have special treatment for certain groups of people. And corporate America knows that the lawsuits are coming, and part of the discussion around revising DEI is to make sure that they are in compliance with what will ultimately go back up through the courts to SCOTUS. And so they are modifying programming and expenditures that identify subgroups of people for which they will have special treatment. But they are not backing away from the fairness and equality initiatives. DEI is here to stay. And I think it's important to recognize that we don't have any special treatment expenditures as a part of this modest program that we've adopted. And being mindful of being inclusive not only has been demonstrated to help the bottom line and to help with employer retention and to help with morale. So it's a wise investment, and that's why all these massive organizations and institutions are doing it. I would say we were a little behind the curve, and we're starting to catch up. The other thing I want to make sure is on the record is there's some surveys in our paperwork today that show that the people that have undergone the training here, the vast majority think it's great, and the majority don't think it was a waste of time. And a little bit of a nerd, I actually went through the mini training that we did, and I thought it was fun and enlightening. It's basically bringing emotional intelligence training into the company or the institution. And unfortunately, not everybody shows up with the best emotional intelligence, but it can be learned. Thanks.
Commissioner Burkett.
You know, addressing the word implicit bias, we all have implicit bias. Every person, when you wake up, you have implicit bias. You know, having lost a few pounds over the last year, I recognize people look at me a little bit differently now, based on a different appearance. You can see someone with tattoos and a bias will kick in. You can see someone with dreadlocks and a bias will kick in. You can see someone with flip-flops and cut-off jeans and a bias will kick in. You can see someone walking around with a beard and a bias will kick in. You can see someone walking around with their pants drooping and a bias will kick in. You can see someone with no hair or lots of hair and the bias will kick in. Every person in this world has implicit bias based on what we see. You can look at someone where they live and your bias will kick in based on the neighborhood they live in, as opposed to not whether they live in Landfall or live at 8th and Dock. Implicit bias is everywhere. You can look at someone's job title and a bias will kick in. So we all have implicit bias, every one of us. If you think you don't.
Mr. Smith?
Well, I haven't been here quite a year, so I was not privy to all the discussion about making this part of the strategic plan. So what I have to make a decision on is based on what I've read, and I've read more than just what's in this book about it over the last week or two. And I think it's a very worthwhile program, and it should stay in the strategic plan. Further, I favor the completing the contract that we have right now, and then when we go further with this program, we can do it with in-house staff. But I think there's a benefit to having a third party involved at this point in time. So, one, I definitely feel like this should stay part of the strategic plan, and we should go with option number 1.
Go ahead, Mr. Hackey.
What was the sample, the total number of people that went through this project that were exposed to this survey?
That were offered the survey?
Yeah.
So as you may recall, we have 5 cohorts of managers. Cohort 1 are the folks who report to me. Cohort 2 are the folks that report to them. So 12 to 15 for that group.
So,
That
For
were
that
offered the
cohort.
survey?
That were part of that training.
so
that
12
then
people were offered?
So
Okay.
that were part of that training. So the only individuals has received this training event has been cohort 2. It's targeted at our leadership team, keep in mind. This first round is targeted at the 80 to 100 individuals that are our leaders, to help them understand what we're trying to accomplish, help them be able to answer staff questions as we roll out surveys and engagement focus groups in next year's budget. So what you received was an abbreviated version of the leadership training, and only cohort 2 of about 15, I'm trying to see if that sounds about right, have actually received it.
But I think the answer is more than 50%.
Well,
Offered, yeah.
I was trying to figure out what kind of buy-in we had, and
Yeah.
I don't think you got enough information yet.
But it's, exactly, it's the start.
So, but at the same time, not to make a decision, but what I've been hearing is, what I heard from Jonathan when he had the sit-down with some of the employees, is the things they were talking about. None of those particular issues, I don't think anybody in this room would object to, and there was a specific reason we brought on staff for hiring internally, and we look at the pay, and when I was on HR, the pay and promotions and promoting from within. I think nobody in this room has any objection to that. I think it's maybe this process. I mean, I think whether we take, this thing is funded through the rest of the year, write it out at the end of the year, and I think maybe what we're talking about, unless we want to defund the whole thing, is tweaking this program more toward the realities of running an organization. That's stuff that I understand, the promoting what within. The other stuff, to be determined. I just don't know if we have a complete buy-in yet from the full staff.
Well, in my interpretation is that's the whole, what we're doing now is getting that baseline setting, getting some training, then figuring out what we need to do moving forward. But we don't have all of that data set. We only have the first cohort that's gone through it. There's more to go through to get that baseline of, okay, what do we need to do next in our organization to address some of these larger issues? That I think is phase 2B that we haven't gotten to yet, is my opinion.
Just like we've changed the name from DEI to IED, I mean, you're saying that there's a way to possibly customize this program for CFPUA and not necessarily have to run with, something that's stamped as DEI on a national level that everybody else is doing. I think what a lot of people here are saying that they don't agree with what everybody else is doing, and a lot of people are running from it. And yes, we're behind the curve, but this curve is also maybe going down on the other side, and we're following it. I don't disagree with some of the things that Jonathan was talking about. I think everybody wants that internally for our employees and our staff.
All right, any other comments on budget? I'm sorry.
Well, last one is, I agree with all that. I think we've had issues that have been addressed throughout every organization. There are things, I think the workforce management position was very well suited for our size and what we're trying to accomplish, and even in the hiring, making sure we're hiring from diverse, not just getting a few candidates in a certain group, whatever. I think all those objectives are valid. I think the workforce manager, to me, filled that role. I think this is just kind of like your point. Like, I don't feel like there's a strong. I've heard both ways, on how this like just affects the staff morale. This all kind of ties together to being overworked and you know, hiring new people and then having something you know, training you go through and what the sentiment is on that. I just felt like the more we go into this, I felt like the workforce manager was the hire to meet the goal that we had set out. That's my opinion.
So we essentially have three options with this budget note too. Leave it as is, leave the budget as proposed, is the status quo, leave our programs in, defund it completely, take it out of the budget, or defund the consultant. So I'll take any motions.
I would move for option one.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries. All right, so now we need a motion to adopt the budget as amended per budget note 1. Right, per budget note 1, because we already voted on. Yeah, okay.
Could, point of order, just ask, do we know who, was I the only nay on that vote? Okay, thank you.
What was that?
That is correct, right?
I was the only nay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
Mr. Waddell and Mr. Porter were opposed.
Okay, thank you. Right. Yep. So now, we just need to adopt the budget as amended per budget note 1.
So moved.
Second.
So, motion and a second, Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
One nay? Anybody else? Okay, thank you. All right. Given that, I don't believe we need the policy discussion. Any other action items to come before the board?
We have nothing from staff.
Okay. Any other closing comments? Nothing for, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr.
All
Commissioner.
for his great efforts. I saw him in the airport in DC yesterday as he was coming back from American Waterworks.
Waterworks Association?
Do you have the award?
No, this was a different.
Oh, different, oh, you always come back with an award. Come on. Okay.
Madam
Next
Chair?
time. Go ahead, Commissioner Zappa.
I'd like to piggyback on Commissioner Barfield's thoughts. I believe this is Carl's last meeting with the
Oh,
board.
no, we're not letting him leave. We changed that.
Oh, we did, oh, yeah.
At the last
didn't
one.
tell him
Last
yet.
meeting, yeah. no.
Yep,
With
so
Carl
I just
and
wanted to
Christie.
congratulate him on a
Carl
wonderful
and
career.
Christie?
And Christie,
You
oh,
need-
excuse me, yes, and Christie as well. Both of you, thank you so much.
Christie.
And congratulations on your new chapter in life. As much as I hate it for us, I'm really happy for you. And we will miss you. And you won't be able to be replaced, but we'll find other people to move the organization forward. You've done tremendous work within our community and for this organization, and we thank you.
Here, here.
Yeah, and I want to comment on that too. I mean, you know, I was one of the biggest complainers about CFPUA, and that's how I ended up on this board. But Carl, when Carl came in, I mean, he made an immediate impact. And really, all these things we're talking about, you know, when you have a problem and just getting things done, and the mentality that you brought to this organization is it's just been really remarkable to see it. And I think your legacy is in a lot of these staff you have under you who have picked up a lot of your trades.
Here.
And I think your good work will continue here through them. And so anyway, but just being a part of that whole thing, it's much appreciated. Good job.
Appreciate all the support.
Well done.
And I'll add, when I joined the board, we talked a lot about customer service. And it seems like every meeting, we were talking about customer service and customer service. So kudos to Christy and her staff, because it's a very quiet, we don't have those discussions anymore that we were having many years ago. So it's, you have both made very impactful legacies on the organization. So thank you both. Thank you both.
And I'd
Madam
like-
Chair, we will ask Carl and Christie to come back to a future meeting for a resolution.
Yes,
How about that?
yes, yeah. Yeah. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thanks all.